My name is Sarah, and I'm 25 years old. Not long ago, I got an unexpected call from my mom. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years, so I was surprised to hear from her. She called because she needed my help. Something terrible had just happened to my sister and her husband. To explain a bit, my sister is 21, and I'll call her Emily. Her husband, the man she's with now, was actually supposed to be my husband once. Years ago, my fiancé Alex, who is also 25, was engaged to me. Alex and I had been together since college, and after nearly 3 years, he proposed. He even planned a surprise party on the night of our engagement. I was thrilled, feeling like I was on top of the world, until that afternoon when everything changed. Around 3 p.m. on our engagement day, I stepped outside to get better phone reception. I wandered into the backyard and saw something that shattered my heart. There was my sister, Emily, and my fiancé, Alex, locked in a passionate kiss. They were so caught up in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there for a few seconds. I was frozen, staring in complete disbelief. After being with him for so long and on the night of our engagement, I couldn't believe he would betray me like this. Eventually, they noticed me and quickly pulled apart, but the damage was already done. I couldn't bear to be around them, so I ran to my car and drove straight to the nearest hotel. My mind was racing, desperately trying to process what I'd just witnessed, hoping that somehow it wasn't real. But then, while I was still in shock, I received a text from Emily. She apologized and told me that she was in love with Alex. It turned out this wasn't a one-time thing. It had been going on for a while. I broke down completely when I read her message. Then Alex texted me, saying the same thing. He admitted that he'd only proposed to me because he thought that by committing to me, he could push Emily out of his mind. Obviously, that plan hadn't worked. Instead, it only made him want her more. He tried to explain that it wasn't about me, it was about their connection and how they just knew they were meant to be together. I felt like my entire relationship had been a lie, that I'd just been a placeholder in Alex's life until he figured out his feelings for Emily. I stayed in the hotel for a few days, trying to come to terms with everything. I was in shock, feeling lost, and struggling to believe that this was really happening. After about 5 days, I finally decided to return home because I needed to collect my things and get back to work. I couldn't afford to lose my job on top of everything else. When I got home, I found my whole family there, staying with Alex, all waiting for me to return. It could have been a comforting scene if it wasn't for the reason I'd left in the first place. While I was gone, everyone had been trying to contact me nonstop, sending text after text, but I hadn't responded to a single one. As soon as I walked in, chaos broke out. Everyone rushed over to hug me, saying how relieved they were to see me. Even Emily had the nerve to come up to me, eyes full of tears, and give me a big hug, as if nothing was wrong. I just stood there in shock, unable to respond, surrounded by my family, who seemed to be completely oblivious to the pain I was feeling. Once things finally calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them I was only back to collect my belongings and leave for good. That's when Alex, who had been quiet the whole time, finally spoke up. He announced that I didn't need to move out because he had already packed his things and was moving in with Emily now that everything was out in the open. To my disbelief, my entire family looked thrilled, my parents, my aunt, and even my dad's younger sister, who lives with us. They all had big smiles on their faces, as if this was the best news they'd ever heard. Emily was standing beside Alex, looking at me with a sad smile, as if she wanted me to be happy for her. I couldn't take it anymore and finally asked them why on earth they were smiling. As far as I could see, there was absolutely nothing to be happy about. I was devastated. My sister had destroyed my engagement and stolen my boyfriend of almost 3 years. I felt so betrayed, and there was nothing funny or joyful about it at all. And my mom spoke up, telling me that even though they couldn't undo what had happened, they could try to accept what was coming. She explained that they believed the future meant Emily and Alex being together, and while their relationship had started with betrayal, they genuinely felt sorry for the hurt caused and hoped I'd understand that this was somehow for the best. Emily apologized for taking Alex from me, saying she hadn't been able to stop herself from falling in love with him. She wished she'd told me sooner, so I wouldn't have had to find out in such a painful way. Then, to top it off, she said they were deeply in love and intended to spend their lives together. As if to prove their point, they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eye, moved by the moment. I couldn't hold back anymore. I snapped, telling them this wasn't something to get sentimental about. What they had done was appalling. Shockingly, my family got irritated with me, calling me selfish for not being happy for Emily. They said I was making it all about myself and were clearly annoyed at my reaction. Stunned by their attitude, I told them all to get out of my house. I couldn't believe how they were backing Emily and Alex while treating me like I was the problem. They acted as if I was overreacting, like my feelings were somehow unreasonable. My father stepped in and told me not to act immature, saying things like this happen and I should just move on. He even suggested I should feel happy that Emily had found her soulmate instead of being resentful. It felt like they were all seeing things completely backward, and I couldn't take it anymore. I just went to my room, packed a few things, and left again without saying another word. I ignored them as they called after me, asking me to stay. It was clear to me that their priority was Emily and her happiness, not my feelings or what was morally right. They were so busy justifying Emily's actions that they completely forgot I was a person with real emotions too. After that day, my family tried contacting me multiple times, but I ignored every attempt. I felt I didn't owe them anything after the way they'd treated me. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Emily and Alex's wedding. Naturally, I declined. Many of our mutual friends also turned down the invitation to support me, and some family members who knew the full story distanced themselves from my family as well, seeing how poorly I'd been treated. It's been 3 years since then, and I've cut off all contact with them. Occasionally, they try to reach out, usually on my birthday or holidays like New Year's, but I always ignore their messages. I didn't block them, but did unfriend them on social media. Since I keep my profile public, they can still see my posts, which is intentional. I wanted them to see that I was living a good life, to feel a little envy after all they'd put me through. I'll admit it was petty, but it felt like a small way to show them I was doing fine without them. Until recently, I hadn't heard anything about what was going on in their lives. Then, about 5 days ago, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I realized it was my mother. Instinctively, I wanted to hang up, but she sounded so desperate that I hesitated. She begged me to listen, saying she just needed a few minutes of my time. Reluctantly, I agreed. She explained that Emily and Alex had started a business a couple of years ago, but it wasn't doing well at all. Their investors had started pulling out because the business was failing to make any profit. To try and save it, they borrowed more money, but things only got worse, and now they were drowning in debt. Loan sharks were after them, and they were being hounded by everyone they owed, investors, employees, and lenders. My mother told me they had run out of options, and since I was living comfortably, she asked if I would be willing to help them out as a last resort. She wasn't asking for a small amount either. She wanted nearly $105,000 to help Emily and Alex pay off their debts. When my mom asked me to help Emily and Alex, I couldn't help but question why Emily herself hadn't called if she was in such desperate need. Why was she letting our mother be the one to reach out? My mom explained that Emily and Alex didn't even know she was asking me for help. They had specifically told her not to. I guess they all remembered what happened 3 years ago. Emily didn't want me to know about their struggles and wasn't ready to ask for my help. But my mom was desperate. She didn't know anyone else who could come up with that amount of money so quickly. Apparently, things had gotten really tough for Emily and Alex. A few months had passed and they were struggling just to put food on the table. Both my parents and Alex's family were helping them as much as possible, but it still wasn't enough. Most of my family, including Alex's parents, were retired, so they had their own futures to think about. That's why my mom, left with no other options, had finally called me. Sure, I could afford to help them if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. Emily was right not to contact me. They lost the right to ask anything of me the day they betrayed me. I told my mom that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. She sounded so upset and accused me of being cruel, saying I needed to think about my family. But I reminded her that Emily and Alex didn't think about me when they had their affair, and my family didn't think about me while supporting them afterward. So why should I think about them now? I worked hard to get where I am today, and I wasn't about to hand over $105,000 to two people who didn't deserve it. My mom started crying on the phone, saying she never thought I'd grow up to be so selfish, and warned that my sister and her husband were in serious trouble. But I held firm. I told her that it was unfortunate, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, my mom has been texting me constantly, almost every hour, pleading with me to reconsider. She keeps saying I need to think about my sister, and that this isn't the time for petty revenge. She claims that if I don't help Emily now, I'll regret it in the future. She's acting desperate, and I don't know what to say to her anymore. I don't want to feel like the bad guy, but I can't bring myself to help them financially after what happened. So, am I wrong for not helping my sister out after she betrayed me by taking my fiancé 3 years ago? Update *, I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done it before because on one level, I wanted them to see that I was doing fine without them, and on another level, I thought that completely cutting them off might be something I'd regret if something terrible happened. But now, I just don't care anymore. I should have removed them from my life 3 years ago. Keeping them around all this time was the real petty thing I did. Refusing to help Emily now isn't petty. It's simply the logical choice. They've already wasted so much money, and even if I gave them the $105,000 now, I doubt they'd be able to pay it back. It's a massive amount, and while I'm doing well financially, that doesn't mean I can just hand over that kind of money without expecting anything in return. Even if it were a close friend I was helping, I'd still expect to be repaid. But these people? They're family only by name. They're definitely not my loved ones. I can't expect them to pay me back, so I really have no reason to help them. I talked to a few friends about the situation, and they agreed I made the right decision by refusing to lend them the money, not out of revenge, but because it's just impractical and foolish to expect me to help the very people who betrayed me. Now that my mom is blocked, she can't guilt-trip me anymore, and I have nothing to worry about. At least, that's what I thought. Update *. Hi, everyone. Something big happened today. I was at work. While I was at work, I got a call from my neighbor. She told me there was a couple outside my house, shouting for me to come out and talk to them. She said they looked really agitated and had been yelling at my door for nearly an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but deep down, I already knew who it was. When she described them, my suspicion was confirmed. It was Emily and Alex. My neighbor urged me to come back home to deal with them, saying she didn't think they had good intentions. Given the situation and knowing it was Emily and Alex, I agreed with her and thanked her for letting me know. I immediately left work and started driving home, worried they might try to get inside my house. I arrived about 15 minutes later, only to find them trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my front door. I pulled up and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I grabbed my phone to call the police right away, but Alex reacted quickly, rushing over to knock the phone out of my hand. Emily then walked up to me and said they were only there to talk and didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and warned them not to expect an invitation inside. Whatever they had to say would have to be discussed outside in the yard. Thankfully, they didn't argue and seemed okay with that, which was a relief. I had no intention of letting them in, especially with how aggressive they were acting. Emily began to speak, telling me that our mom had told her about my refusal to help them. She also knew I'd ignored their texts and even blocked them all. She accused me of being unfair, saying that since it had been 3 years, I should have gotten over everything by now. According to her, I was being silly and dramatic just to get attention from the family. She said she felt disrespected because I refused to help, which was why she'd come to talk to me. Then, she mentioned that she'd managed to gather some money for now by selling their house and all their jewelry. However, she hinted that she might need more in the future and wanted assurance that she could rely on me when the time came. I looked her straight in the eye and told her she absolutely couldn't rely on me for help, now or ever. I made it clear that I had no intention of supporting them and that I despised both her and Alex. I was so angry that I warned her it was taking everything in me not to hit her at that moment, so it would be best for everyone if they just left. Shockingly, Alex demanded that they wouldn't leave until I signed a document promising to give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was absurd, and I knew such a document wouldn't hold any legal weight, especially if I was forced into signing it under pressure. They had to be out of their minds if they thought I'd go along with something like that. I firmly told them to get off my property, but Emily suddenly pushed me, insisting that I had to help them because we were family. She claimed I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities. I was stunned that she actually shoved me, and for a brief moment, I felt tempted to retaliate, but I held myself back. I knew getting physical would only escalate the situation. Instead, I decided to pick up my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Alex knocked it away earlier, and made a quick decision. I dashed to my car, jumped in, and drove off without looking back. Luckily, I hadn't turned off the engine when I got out of the car earlier, so it was still running, which gave me a head start. They didn't chase after me, which was a relief, but they stayed at my house, which was concerning. Once I was at a safe distance, I called the police to report what was happening. After making the call, I circled back and arrived at my house just before the police showed up, which was about 20 minutes later. When the police arrived, I explained everything that had happened. They ended up arresting Emily and Alex, taking them away. I knew the charges weren't serious, so they'd probably get off without much trouble, but it was still a relief to see them taken away, even temporarily, so I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore. It's been a few hours since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange. I thought at least one of them would have tried to contact me by now, maybe from a different number, but no one has reached out. Either they're finally over everything and won't try to mess with me anymore, or they're just waiting for the right time to reach out once things have calmed down a bit. Update 3 asterisk. So, my last update was about a week ago, and during that time, I actually started to believe my family might finally leave me alone after the incident with the police. But I was wrong, not even that stopped them from coming back. This time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking to talk to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and unlike Emily and Alex, my parents seemed a lot more humbled. I decided to let them in. As soon as my mom stepped inside, she began crying and apologized for choosing Emily's side over mine. My dad explained that after they found out Emily and Alex were arrested and had even physically pushed me, they couldn't see them in the same light anymore. They had decided to cut them off. My mom kept crying the whole time, while my dad apologized over and over for siding with Emily in the past when, in reality, I had been the one wronged. I told them I appreciated their apology and that they had finally come to their senses, but it was too little, too late. I'd already grown used to living independently and had no interest in going back to putting my family's needs before my own. Their visit and apology were nice, but I couldn't promise to rebuild our relationship. I didn't see the point in trying to mend something that was so deeply broken, even if it was with my parents. They protested a little, saying we could work things out if we tried hard enough. But the truth was, I didn't want to. I wanted to live my life free from all the hurt and complications of the past. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done trying to make things work. They seemed disappointed, but eventually accepted my decision. Before leaving, they asked if I could at least unblock them, so they could stay in touch. I agreed, and unblocking them does feel a bit strange, but for now, that's where things stand. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm focusing on my own peace and well-being. I'll keep you updated if anything else unfolds.